Welcome and good evening, wherever you are, whether nestled beneath warm covers, listening from a dimly lit room, or letting the final thoughts of your day drift away. I invite you now to travel with me, not with haste, but gently, as if through a misted window of memory, or down a narrow cobbled street that no longer exists. Tonight, we slip quietly into another century, a quieter world. One dimly lit by oil lamps and belief, ruled not by reason, but by rhythm and fear. A time when people measured their days by the toll of the church bell, and the sky itself seemed to lower with the weight of dread. This is not a tale meant to disturb. It is not told with urgency or alarm, but with quiet observation, with a kind of reverent hush, like one who reads by candlelight while others sleep. We are going to spend time in a town, unnamed but familiar in its shape and stone. A town caught in the long shadow of plague. You will not be alone. The past will keep us company. We'll begin in the streets, among the smells of herbs and the hush of abandoned stalls. Then we'll walk beside a man who dug graves and wrote poetry. We'll drift toward stranger currents of music and movement and mass hysteria. And finally, we'll dine in candlelit halls with those who feasted even as the world beyond their gates fell quiet. But first, the rosemary burns. Bell tolls, empty stalls, and fever dreams, the day begins. Not with songbirds or sunlight, but with the low, echoing toll of iron bells. 1. Pause. 3. Each ring signals a name, not aloud, but known. A merchant, a child, a midwife. You lie on your back in a bed of straw and linen. The fabric smells faintly of lavender, or perhaps vinegar. It is hard to tell. The scent of preservation has become the scent of everything, of laundry, of food, of skin. You rise slowly. There is no reason to rush. Outside your door, the town no longer moves as it once did. The rhythm of footsteps has thinned. The chatter of vendors is gone. Only the sound of the wind slipping between narrow alleys remains. And the bells. You wrap a cloth around your nose and mouth, not because you know it will help, but because everyone does. Inside the cloth, a sprig of rosemary has been tucked. Its bitter fragrance fills your breath. In your hand, you carry a clay bowl. You step out into the street. The homes are sealed, shutters drawn tight, many marked. Red symbols painted hastily on doors, signifying quarantine. Sometimes a date is scratched beneath it, like a quiet countdown. You do not knock. You do not linger. Every few paces, you kneel. You place a bundle of rosemary, thyme, or juniper in the bowl and light it. The herbs smoke slowly, curling skyward in a lazy spiral. The air thickens with their scent, earthy, sharp, almost medicinal. Some believe the smoke can purify the air, drive away the invisible death that moves from home to home like a shadow. Others burn the herbs simply to have something to do. There are no markets today, no meat hung from hooks, no wheels of cheese. The fruit stalls sit uncovered, baskets upturned. What was not sold has spoiled, and no one has cleared it. The baker's window is shuttered. So is the seamstress's door. You pass the square. Where once townsfolk gathered, only pigeons remain. They peck and flutter, unbothered. Even the rats seem slower, less bold. You are not alone. A figure passes on the other side of the street, wrapped in a long robe, with gloves, and a strange mask shaped like a beak. A plague doctor. You don't know his name, and he doesn't look at you. He walks like a shadow, deliberate, distant, already half a ghost. You return to your street at midday. The sky is gray, not with rain, but with stillness. Even the clouds move slowly, as though burdened by the air below. At your door, you sit and wait. You drink weak ale, eat coarse bread. The taste is dull. Your tongue feels tired. Somewhere, a dog barks once, then is silent. You close your eyes and drift, not into sleep, but into something else. A quiet within the quiet, a fever dream of memory and confusion. Did you dream? Was there music? You think you heard it, a child humming. Or perhaps it was you. The tune vanishes as you try to catch it. Evening falls without notice. A thin mist coils through the lanes. The candles in your home are short now, wax pooling in little copper dishes. You light one, and its flame flutters uncertainly, like it too is weary. And once more, the bell. This time, only once. You do not know the name behind the ring, but you imagine a face. A woman, perhaps. Eyes kind? Hair tied in linen. She sold pears on market days. Or maybe she didn't. Maybe she only passed you once, years ago. She is gone now. And tomorrow, another bell will ring. You stretch your legs before the hearth. The embers are long cold. You do not bother to stir them. Sleep does not come quickly, but it comes eventually, and so do dreams. Now let us turn to another figure, one who moved through this same silence, but left behind something more than footsteps and smoke. A gravedigger who wrote poems. Forgotten voices from the margins imagine a man, not of noble birth, nor clergy, nor scholar, but a laborer, one whose days and often nights were spent among the cold earth, the scent of turned soil, and the soundless presence of the newly departed. He is a gravedigger, not a romantic figure, not one remembered in songs or portraits, but one known in the margins of parish books, beneath lists of names crossed out too quickly, too often. Yet this man, whose work was bound to death, found time to write, not for an audience, not for fame, but for memory, perhaps for meaning. His words, faint and unpolished, scratched onto scraps of parchment or in the backs of account books, now faded by age and damp. Lines shaped not by literary fashion, but by candlelight and cold fingers. We do not know his name, not truly. Perhaps it was John, or Matthias, or something long forgotten. But his voice, or one like his, echoes faintly across the centuries. Listen. The earth is never sated, yet I lay her gifts with care. Each cradle of silence I carve holds a story no one will share. Simple, uneven, but sincere. In times of plague, gravediggers became as vital as healers. Perhaps more so. When others fled the towns, they stayed. When streets emptied, they worked. Their shovels carved not only graves, but order, structure, in the chaos of death. He would rise early, before dawn. The mist would cling low to the hills, dew beating on the edges of his worn tunic. His hands, thick and calloused, would grip the handle of his spade, a familiar weight. Sometimes he worked alone. Other times with an apprentice, or another quiet soul pressed into the work by need, or guilt, or desperation. The graveyard was no longer a quiet place of mourning. It had become a site of industry. Trenches, pits, stacked with care or not, time was short. Earth was stubborn. There were moments, though, when he paused, when the sky blushed faintly with morning light, or a bird sang, ignorant of the season. In those moments, between burials, between tolls of the bell, he wrote, a girl with curls like candlewicks, a mason's son with crooked smile. I lay them down like lines of verse, then walk alone another mile. Some may have found his poetry distasteful, sentimental, unfitting of his station, but perhaps it was his way of witnessing, of remembering. After all, who else was keeping count? The names blurred, the faces faded, but a line, even a fragile one, could carry something forward. He wrote of small things too, of birds nesting in the eaves of the chapel, of moss growing between the stones, of a cat who slept atop a grave every afternoon. She waits for one who won't return, her tale a metronome of grace. I never knew his name myself, but she returns to the same place. There is something comforting in this, that even in a time of darkness and loss, there were those who took note of life, of memory, of moments that mattered, even if only to them. We imagine him now, one evening, seated on a low stone wall, his feet aching from the day's work. A candle flickers at his side, its wax dripped onto the spine of a discarded prayer book. He writes slowly, pausing to listen, not for voices, but for silence, the kind of silence that holds meaning, that isn't emptiness, but fullness, like a field before sowing, or the breath before a song. He smiles faintly, not because he is happy, but because he is alive, because even in this, there is purpose. His last known verse, if it was truly his, reads simply, "When all the ink has run to ground, and time has thinned my name, I hope some stranger finds my words and softly reads the same." Tonight, perhaps, you are that stranger. Now, let us follow another current, one stranger still, less solitary, more collective, less poetic, but no less haunting. A mystery not of words, but of movement. A mania that made people dance until they could dance no more. A soft investigation into trembling feet and strange rhythms. Imagine this ... a quiet square. The cobblestones are warm from the morning sun. A fountain bubbles faintly in the center, its surface dotted with leaves. A baker sweeps the threshold of his shop. A child chases a chicken, barefoot. And then a woman begins to dance. Not for coin, not for music, not for joy. She moves erratically, arms flung like leaves in wind, her eyes unfocused. Her feet stamp, twist, and leap, but without direction, without rhythm. Some watch, some laugh, but she does not stop. The morning turns to afternoon. Sweat darkens her dress. Her hair sticks to her cheeks. Still, she dances. Her lips tremble. She speaks, perhaps, but the words are lost. And then another joins her, and another. By nightfall, the square is full, not with merchants, or song, or speech, but with bodies in motion. This was dancing mania, a phenomenon that flowed through the cracks of medieval Europe, and no one truly understood why. Let us settle into this odd current of history, gently, without the need to explain too much too quickly. The most infamous outbreak began in July of 1518 in the city of Strasbourg. Accounts tell us that one Frau Trophea began the event. She stepped into the street and began to dance, wordlessly, aimlessly, for 6 days, not in celebration, not in festival. Her limbs moved without purpose. Her face remained solemn. There was no music, and yet she swayed and spun as if compelled by something unseen. And others followed. Within a week, 30 had joined her. Within a month, the number had risen to hundreds. Imagine the sound, not drums, not fiddles, but feet, slapping stone, shuffling in leather shoes, the rustle of fabric, the occasional murmur or moan. The city, bewildered, summoned physicians. They declared it not supernatural, not a curse, nor possession, but an illness of the blood, a natural fever of movement. Strasbourg's authorities, well-meaning and slightly frantic, decided the only remedy was to let them dance it out. So they provided halls, musicians, even paid for a stage, hoping to exhaust the afflicted. But it did not stop. Some collapsed, some injured themselves. A few, we are told, danced until they died, of fatigue, of stroke of heart. The silence that followed was not peace, but confusion. And this was not the first case, nor the last. Similar outbreaks occurred in Aachen, in Cologne, in Metz and Basel, in the Low Countries, and deep into Germany and France, for centuries. These were not localized or isolated spasms, but widespread tremors across the map of medieval life. And so we ask softly, curiously, what was this? Some say it was ergot poisoning, a mold that grew on rye, causing hallucinations and convulsions. Others suggest mass hysteria, a form of psychological contagion spread not through breath, but belief. There are theories involving ritual, ecstatic religious expression, forgotten cultic dances, even suppressed trauma from famine and plague. But here, in the hush of this narrative, we need not choose. Instead, we may wonder what it felt like to witness it. A cobbler in his shop, pausing his stitching as a line of dancers passes by, their feet raw, their eyes distant. A priest, unsure whether to offer prayer or penance, or simply retreat into the dark of the nave. A mother clutching her child, whispering not of demons, but of exhaustion, confusion, dread. And the dancers themselves? Did they know what moved them? Did they feel relief? Terror? Nothing? There are accounts of participants begging for release, of their feet aching beyond comprehension, of their minds clouded, but their bodies refusing to stop. In this way, it was not a dance, but a storm inside the skin. Even now, scholars debate. Some lean into neurology, others into theology, some into folklore. But perhaps it is best, in our quiet setting, to accept that history holds many shadows, and not all can be named. Dancing mania faded, eventually. The last major outbreaks slipped into the late 17th century, becoming rarer, then vanishing. And yet, it left footprints, not just in stone squares, but in collective memory. Some say the dances were desperate prayers. Others say they were an echo of old rituals, barely remembered. But all agree. They happened, they moved, and then they ceased. Now, let us leave the cobbled streets behind. Let us rise, quietly, above them. Let us peer through gilded windows, where candlelight dances not from frenzy, but from luxury. A different kind of rhythm awaits, not the tremor of hysteria, but the hush of deliberate opulence. A calm descent into contrasts, abundance amid ruin, silence behind silk walls. Imagine yourself, not in the streets, nor among the sick, but in a great hall. The air is perfumed, not with rosemary this time, but with cinnamon and cloves. The scent of roast fowl, spiced wine, and beeswax candles hangs in the stillness like a heavy tapestry. You are standing in the threshold of a noble's manor, somewhere in the countryside, far from the city walls, far from the tolling bells, far from the black crosses painted on doors. Here the fire crackles, goblets are filled, and somewhere a musician plucks a harp softly, though his eyes are distant. It is the year 1348. Outside, Europe is collapsing, but inside, there is feasting. The nobility, you see, lived quite literally apart. Their homes were often removed from the cramped quarters of towns. Their windows were glazed, their linens laundered, their access to food unbroken. They had horses to flee, servants to shield them, physicians to advise. And in the face of the plague, when so little was understood, such illusions of control mattered. It is said that some lords shut their gates and hosted endless dinners. They invited only the healthy, the wealthy, the desirable. They sealed themselves in, not just from disease, but from reality. In Florence, Giovanni Boccaccio would famously describe such a retreat in the Decameron, a tale within a tale. 10 young nobles escaping the city, telling stories in a secluded villa, while death bloomed in the valleys below. Imagine them reclining on embroidered cushions, exchanging tales, drinking wine. The outside world became a whisper, and they did not listen. But still, even in these banquets, silence found its way in. A noblewoman, pausing mid-laughter, remembering her nursemaid, gone. A lord sipping spiced mead, thinking of a steward who did not return. Servants whispered of entire villages emptied. Carts bearing the dead rumbled down roads, unseen but not unheard. The woods, once busy with foragers and pilgrims, now stood hushed. There are accounts of tables heaped with meats and pastries. Yet the appetite thinned. For how long can one dine when the world is starving? And yet, feasting continued, not always from decadence, sometimes from defiance, to eat, to toast, to fill the hall with light and song, was a way to pretend, a way to hold the darkness back. It is difficult to say whether these banquets were celebratory, mournful, or both. Some likely believed they were blessed, protected, chosen. Others surely wondered, in quiet moments, between the courses, whether the sickness would find its way in, carried not on breath, but on fate. We may imagine the scene in gentle stillness. A servant leans down, refills a goblet. The Lord nods, barely looking. The harper shifts on his stool, begins a new tune, something slow, older than memory. A noblewoman runs her fingers along the stem of her glass. Her eyes drift to the tall windows. Beyond them, only darkness. No movement, no stars, no certainty. And yet, the hall remains warm. The plates are full. There is still music. There is still time. This contrast of excess beside emptiness, of safety amid ruin, has echoed through every century touched by catastrophe. In our quiet reflection, we may not judge these banquets. We may simply observe them. The need to feel alive is not new. The desire to banish fear with food and fire, not unique. And in the silence of history, we find again and again the same rhythm of people seeking meaning through ritual, repetition, and denial. Now, let us step softly from the hall. Let the heavy wooden doors close behind us. The music fades, the warmth ebbs, and we are left once again in the hush. You may find yourself now resting a little deeper. Perhaps the flickering images of plague-stricken towns have softened at the edges, faded like old parchment in candlelight. What remains is a quiet sense of having walked, slowly, carefully, through places that once pulsed with life and sorrow, with silence and song. We began our descent among the streets, where rosemary smoked and bells tolled, where the rhythm of daily life fractured into stillness. You stood in doorways, watched shutters close, heard the low murmurs of prayer and uncertainty drifting between cobbled alleys. Then we sat with the forgotten, the ones who dug the graves, but wrote poems. We traced faint ink on brittle parchment, echoes of hands long gone, minds still reaching toward expression, even as the world darkened around them. We wandered, too, through mystery, through the strange, fevered phenomenon of the dancing mania. 1,000 feet pounding earth, a collective spiral into something not quite explainable. Not madness, perhaps, but something older, deeper, a yearning to be released or simply seen. And lastly, we entered halls lit by chandeliers and candlelight, where music played, where goblets shone, where those who could dined on through the end, as if to believe, even for an evening longer, that the world remained intact. And now, we are here, back in the quiet of your room, back in the present, where the plague is no longer a daily whisper, and rosemary burns only for pleasure, not protection. The cobbled streets are distant now, softened by time. The tolling bells have long since stopped. And yet, their echoes shape the world we inherit. You, lying in stillness, have walked gently across centuries, not to seek fear or thrill, but simply understanding. The past, after all, is not a place of monsters, but of people. People who dreamed, feared, suffered, and loved, as you do. And sleep, like history, comes in layers. So allow it to settle now. Let your breath fall into rhythm with the quiet. Let the pages close. And should you drift, may it be gently, as if through streets lined with rosemary, beneath a sky full of stars, and stories still waiting to be told. Good night, and thank you for listening.